Hi there, everyone. It's 4 o'clock in New York. The single biggest roadblock to the authoritarian ambitions of Donald Trump and his aides and allies is right now, as we come on the air, without a doubt, the people of Minneapolis and the choices they make. Every step Donald Trump takes is being met with their grassroots pushback. And that is all happening as Trump is finding new ways to push the autocratic envelope. An internal memo obtained by our colleague, White House correspondent Laura Barron-Lopez, significantly expands the power that federal agents have to make an arrest without a warrant. Two former ICE officials telling us that the memo means agents need to determine the status of everyone they encounter and then make arrests if they are undocumented. It was signed on January 28th. It happens to be one day after Donald Trump said his administration would, quote, de-escalate the crisis in Minneapolis. But as we have reported here, there's very little evidence that those words were backed by any action. Very little evidence that that is happening. Harrowing video obtained by Minnesota Public Radio, NPR, shows federal agents drawing their guns on an observer in the town of St. Peter. Watch.
Call 911. I'm right at the corner of Jefferson. No, no, I will not. I will not get out of the car. No, no, I will not get out of the car. You guys, I need CEOs here now.
Get out of the car.
No, I will not get out of the car. You
Get out
can't.
of the car.
Get your hands off of me. Get your hands off me.
So Minnesota Public Radio reports that after that point in the video, what happened was that she was dragged out. She was forced to the ground, even as you can hear her telling them, quote, "This is my constitutional right." As for her repeatedly talking about calling 911, the local police chief did arrive. He did have to intervene to stop agents from taking her into custody, into detention. What Minnesota Public Radio says is the first time a local Minnesota police department has intervened against federal agents since Operation Metro Surge began. The observer is a U.S. citizen. She's a local resident. In a statement posted on X in response to the video, the Department of Homeland Security claimed she was an agitator who was stalking and obstructing law enforcement. She's part of what has become a small army of observers determined to watch and shed light on the abuses of the Trump administration. Washington Post reports this, quote, "More than 34,000 Minnesotans have signed up to be trained as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement observers with various activist groups in recent weeks, many of them since January 7th, when a federal agent shot and killed Renee Good." That is 34,000 people signing up for work that obviously appears dangerous and we now know is deadly, potentially, in the wake of 2 killings in 3 weeks. The example of courage, of extraordinary commitment to one another in the face of brutal federal overreach that the people of Minneapolis are setting for us and for the world is not going unnoticed. Their work is starting a national movement. New York Times reports that activists are applying pressure on big business, particularly Minnesota's homegrown retailer Target. From that report, quote, "Protesters opposed to the federal immigration crackdown in Minneapolis have turned their attention to Target stores across the country, putting pressure on that Minnesota-based retail giant to stop cooperating with federal agents. Demonstrations have recently taken place at about 24 Target stores in Minnesota, with additional protests in other cities, including Chicago, Seattle, Philadelphia, and New York. Over the weekend, there were more protests across our country. This was one of them in Los Angeles, where thousands of people gathered in front of City Hall there. Officials say that some arrests were made after protesters failed to disperse. In Portland, Oregon, the mayor asked ICE to leave the city after federal agents launched tear gas at a crowd of demonstrators that he says were peaceful demonstrators. The Trump administration meeting its match in the grassroots resistance, the people of Minneapolis and across our country is where we start today. Professor of History at New York University, Ruth Ben-Ghiat is back. She's the author of Strong Men, Mussolini to the Present, Also joining us, political analyst, host of the Bulwark podcast, Tim Miller is back, and staff writer for The Atlantic, Isaac Stanley Becker. He's been reporting from Minneapolis. He joins us. Isaac, you were last here on the streets of Minneapolis. You are now back, but you have left us with this dispatch. Let me read about your, I don't want to call it a ride-along, but your reporting from the police chief's squad car. You write this: federal agents have mobilized so aggressively that their impact is fathomable only to those on the receiving end of it, and to the local police officers overwhelmed by it. In Minneapolis, federal agents outnumber the police at least 5-1. ICE's dragnet is so broad that some of O'Hara's officers have been caught up in it, stopped while off duty. One officer in neighboring St. Paul has been stopped twice. That's according to Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, I wanted to spend some time with Chief O'Hara and ride around the city with him because I wanted to get a better picture of what this actually looked like from law enforcement trying to keep the peace in Minneapolis, law enforcement not trying to do violence to citizens and residents there, but to maintain order and maintain public safety. And they're just under an extraordinary amount of pressure. The burden is immense. Calls for service have surged because there is just so much chaos and disturbance on the streets created by these federal agents. I share your interest in this extraordinary episode in St. Peter where it seems there was intervention from local law enforcement. And I think that speaks to this dynamic and potential standoff between federal forces and local law enforcement who are trying to keep their own citizens safe. And that was something that was really on the police chief's mind in Minneapolis as well, saying, what is our obligation to the citizens here? How do we act within the law? But how do we keep our own people safe?
What is their understanding of the law in which the federal government is acting in? I mean, it seems that there is no law that allows what was on that videotape.
Well, I think the really complicated thing here is the way the police chief explained it to me. He's caught between two demands. He's saying the federal government wants his local cops to be acting as bodyguards for ICE agents, and clearly they're not going to be doing that. But he's also saying some of the activists and people on the streets want his officers to go and arrest ICE agents, federal agents who they believe are contravening the law. And he says, we also can't do that. There's an aspect of this where they're enforcing federal immigration law, and that's not something that we're going to do, but we also can't necessarily interrupt it. Now, in this case in St. Peter, this small town in Minnesota, the chief appears to have made a different decision about his obligations, clearly not arresting the ICE agents, but intervening and ensuring the release of one of the residents of that city. Now, I think it's interesting here that I think according to the latest information, city officials have actually denied that the chief intervened in this way. So I think that there's a feeling that local jurisdictions that are seen to step out of line in this way could come under federal pressure. And, that's we'll have to see how that develops.
Ruth, how do you see this moment, which I think we are not able to, from our perch here, really appreciate how fraught this is, right? The terror and the courage in the face of that terror, of citizens armed with their telephones and their whistles, and the agitation that we see, again, with our own eyes, and the aggressive nature of ICE agents. And every day it feels to be increasing and increasing and increasing. How do you see this moment?
Yeah, that footage you showed, it's straight out of an authoritarian regime, a junta, or any kind of repressive regime. And, such states depend on people deciding they're not going to see and they're not going to hear anything. They're going to look the other way when their neighbors get dragged out, and they're going to be silent. And they use repression and they buy off people so that will happen. And people are saying, we're not going to do that, because in that way they are modeling solidarity, unity, empathy, and they're doing it in very harrowing conditions. But this is operating like an authoritarian state where there actually is no concept of a legal observer in an authoritarian state, or a legal protest in many states, or the right to assembly. And the ICE agent, there was an ICE agent recently said to one legal observer, if you raise your voice, I will erase your voice. And that's what we're dealing with. And so the extraordinary courage being shown on the streets is really inspiring, and it's what you need under an authoritarian state to construct a pro-democracy movement, the modeling of courage.
Ruth, the piece of it that I think is not getting as much attention as it deserves is the boycott movement, which feels very grassroots in nature. But just talk about the power of the purse and people exercising their rights to protest outside Minnesota-based companies. Scott Galloway is somebody I follow. He's canceling big tech apps every day. I think he canceled Uber today. And just talk to me about the power of people changing their purchasing and their spending habits, and these brands now forever being associated with ICE.
It's really important. And these are things that people who maybe cannot be on the streets or don't want to be on the streets can do. And they've had a resonance and an effect all over the world. In Myanmar, after the coup in 2021, young people constructed apps so that their fellow citizens could see in real time which businesses were collaborating with the junta. And that was very effective. And business has historically been slow to do the right thing. And so these kind of pressure campaigns are very important, peaceful pressure campaigns. And the power of the purse has been demonstrated to be part of effective pushback against autocracy.
Tim, I wonder if you can help sort of frame this political moment. Here's what John Kennedy from your state describes it as, quote, I've never seen a political party take its best issue and turn it into its worst issue in the period of time that it has happened in the last few weeks. Said Kennedy, some things have to change. But you and I have been having these conversations since the morning after the election. And to see both the race to capitulate from big law firms, from prestigious universities, the silence of Hollywood up to 3 weeks ago at the Golden Globes, to see it turned around. I mean, 180 doesn't capture the turnaround. And it's not apples to apples, right? The Golden Globes are not the Grammys. That's a group of creatives that are much more forceful in using their voices. But to see the approval rating of Donald Trump at a whole down in the low 30s, which is where it was during the worst of COVID, to see his approval on immigration deep underwater, I think 14 to 15 points, to see Republicans running so far away from him that there was a meeting where they decided to release the Epstein files to distract from Minneapolis. That's where we are politically. Yeah.
And obviously it's tragic that there had to be 2 deaths to start to spur some of this. So that's, the dark side of this. But like just looking at it just from a political analysis perspective, the change is remarkable. Nicole, when you talk about how we started talking about this the day after the election, 2024, I mean, for almost all of last year, 2025, one of the things that we were talking about was that a lot of Democratic politicians were scared to engage in the issue of immigration. They thought it was a losing issue. Trump had beat them on it twice at that point. Unlike, that they were maybe learning some of the wrong lessons from the first Trump time around, and thought that, maybe they should just focus on other things, kitchen table issues. And the Democratic politicians, it was like the voters really were the tail wagging the dog. The politicians were late to the party a little bit. And to now see this totally flipped, where Democratic politicians, for the most part, we could nitpick some of the messaging, but for the most part, Democratic politicians are leaning in on this and recognizing that it's just totally uncalled for and wrong and heinous on the merits what ICE and CBP are doing, but also recognizing that voters agree with them, and there can be some political opportunity here. You see that, and then on the flip side, it's now you see Republicans like John Kennedy, who are now starting to say that their party should be scared of this issue and that their party should back off a little bit, right? So we've had a total flip where Republicans were crowing and basically saying, I want to drink liberal tears and let's do anything. And, whatever the craziest thing Stephen Miller can come up with, we're on board for it. That has changed. And I think that is the, starkest sign that, the political reality for the Trump presidency overall, but in particular, the immigration issue is changing.
What to me, I can't get my brain around, Tim, is the promise was to deport the worst of the worst. And the politically salient issue for Donald Trump, and I would admit some of us missed it, was that at his rallies, they would provide news clips of violent crimes committed by people who are in this country illegally. Those people are in jail, right? They knew those stories because they were then caught by local law enforcement, prosecuted, and jailed. And so the worst of the worst, who he campaigned on deporting and showed videos at his rallies of the horrible, heinous crimes those people committed, they're in jails. They are not 5-year-olds at preschool. They are not landscapers at work with 4 Marine sons. They are not restaurant workers. They are not teachers. They are not mothers. They are not observers. I mean, why are they doing the thing that nobody wanted to do, the thing that cost them all of their political capital?
Yeah. Well, so I have 2 thoughts on this. One is that, this is a common political mistake where politicians start to buy their own BS a little bit. You go out in a campaign, you take a real issue, maybe you exaggerate it a little bit, and then you get into office and you feel like you need to follow up. And this is right. This is the kind of thing that has befallen lots of politicians, usually not in as dark of ways as it has befallen this administration. But I think they really believe that there were a lot more worst of the worst out there than there were. And I do think that's part of this. At least Trump did. Maybe not, some of the smarter, kind of immigration restrictionists around him like Stephen Miller. But I think Trump at least believed that it was going to be easier to get this low-hanging fruit and that he'd have a lot of, press conferences where he talked about all these bad guys, bad hombres that he got, So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is, again, this momentum. When it came in, they thought they were elected based on this. They put Stephen Miller in, said, here, you have the keys, you and Kristi Noem, you can, whatever you can come up with, immigration, this is your issue. And so they funded it in 2025. They gave them just unimaginable amounts of money. DHS now has more money than the Marine Corps, more money than the Israeli military. And so once you do that, now, this is a little bit out of their own control. Even if they wanted to dial it back, unless they start clawing some of that money back, you can't control all of these new people that you've hired, and all of the initiatives that get started forward. You get into normal bureaucratic creep issues. They have an insane amount of money, a lot of people who don't know what they're doing, who are not meant to be doing enforcement on the interior, either because they're new recruits or because they're border folks, like the 2 that allegedly killed Preddy, who were moved from the border up into the interior of the country. They have all this money for all these people, and they don't know, what else are they going to do? And I think this creep is going to continue, even if they try to dial it back.
It is. It's like this political ball and chain. This thing that they built that is now this thing dragging them down politically. When we come back, 5-year-old Liam Ramos has been free. It was a rare ray of pure light when news broke over the weekend that Liam Conejo Ramos, that 5-year-old boy in the blue bunny hat and the little backpack, who was arrested by ICE agents in Minneapolis, had been released from a Texas detention center alongside his dad, Adrian. They were detained after ICE agents had attempted to use that 5-year-old Liam as bait to arrest other people living in his home, including his pregnant mom. A judge ordered their release with a scathing rebuke to Donald Trump, writing this, quote, "The case has its genesis in the ill-conceived and incompetently implemented government pursuit of daily deportation quotas. Apparently, even if that requires traumatizing children. Observing human behavior confirms that for some among us, the perfidious lust for unbridled power and the imposition of cruelty in its quest knows no bounds, and are bereft of human decency, and the rule of law be damned." The judge, including that indelible image of Liam in his blue bunny hat next to his signature on that order. Liam is right now home safe in Minnesota, but his story, tragically, for our country and the people who will write its history, is a drop in the bucket. According to the Marshall Project, quote, at least 3,800 children under the age of 18, including 20 infants, have been booked since Donald Trump took office. with more than 1/3 of those children being held for longer than 20 days legally permitted. In Liam's school district alone, 4 other students are currently being held in the very same Texas facility where Liam was detained, with Minnesota Public Radio reporting that ICE is illegally detaining and removing Minnesota children to Texas faster than the courts can respond. We're back with Ruth, Tim, and Isaac. There are no words, but the judge found the words that do exist for this behavior. Isaac, again, this was the policy in Trump 1.0 that was so effing odious, Donald Trump reversed it. How are we in overdrive on this front?
Yeah, I guess I want to say 2 things about this. One is that this may be a drop in the bucket, but I think these images matter greatly. We know that we live in a moment where images like this matter a huge amount to our politics. We all remember the image of Donald Trump raising his fist last summer, or the summer before in Butler, Pennsylvania, after his ear was grazed. And I think some of these images from Minneapolis may be just as indelible. This image of 5-year-old Liam in his Spider-Man backpack, the image of federal agents shooting a nurse in the back. And the second point I would make is, tying this to the political question is what is the response to this? And I, when I spoke with Governor Tim Walz last week, he acknowledged that the Democrats have been put in a difficult position politically by Donald Trump's advantage on the immigration issue. And so what is the Democratic policy and position on immigration? And speaking about this case, this 5-year-old saying, the governor saying, we have to be serious about certain enforcement questions, but our policy also has to be, no, we're not going to arrest a 5-year-old in a Spider-Man backpack and a furry blue hat after being picked up from preschool. So I think it's pointing Democrats toward a stance on this very vexed issue.
Ruth, your thoughts on the fact that there's still a struggle, as Isaac's talking about, Governor Walz detailing in their conversations.
Unfortunately, children become pawns and targets in many authoritarian regimes. A few days after Liam was seized, a 2-year-old was taken into custody when agents smashed the car window. And this, many of these people who are being targeted come from places where people were, like juntas, military places, where they are routinely kidnapped. And there's a whole history of children being, sold or trafficked or just given to families in regimes. We have this with the high number of children kidnapped by the Russians in Ukrainian children kidnapped. And so this is something that's very traumatizing, and it's meant to be traumatizing to the families.
Tim, this just feels like another, WTF moment. Like, this is not, I've watched a lot of your segments with Piers Morgan. Like, this is insane. Nobody wants this.
No, pretty much nobody wants this. And I do think I agree with Isaac that is why, this image, will stick with people and will have an impact for a while to come. The thing is, though, there are people within the administration that actively want it. Maybe not the president, but one person that comes to mind is the vice president, who's doing his job as the commander-in-chief of the Twitter battles in the administration this morning, and he's talking about this very issue. And what they're trying to argue is that boy who was brought here seeking asylum from his home country, his father brought him here, and they filed a legal asylum claim. It's not like they swam across the Rio Grande or stuck into the country. Not that that'd be much better, but it is, if we're just being honest about what happened, it is different. They came with what they thought was a legal route during the Biden administration. They applied for asylum. They thought they did the right thing, and then Donald Trump's goons arrested him and sent him to Texas. And J.D. Vance was on Twitter this morning saying that was the right thing to do because those people that came and asked for asylum during the Biden administration, that was illegitimate. So they're not trying to change the laws to make that clear so people coming know what the rules are. They just have decided that a huge group of people that came through what they thought was a legal process are now illegal. And by fiat, the vice president has just decided that they are illegal and that we should grab them, and even if they're 5-year-old kids, and we should send them to detention centers across the country against the wishes of their family. I don't think that's going to be very popular, but like that is their stated position as of this morning, that is what they intend to do, even to people that came here through a process that they thought was a legal one.
Yeah, I mean, this question about the laws catching up with what they're doing, people who have legal pending asylum cases, people who are here. I mean, some of their future targets that have been reported. Tim Snyder has been warning about an upcoming or imminent operation in Ohio. It's a community with legal status. I want to show you what former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder told me about all of this, specifically in Minneapolis, but it'll probably play out in other places. I'll show you that after the break. No one goes anywhere.
I think we've all been appalled by what it is that we have seen, not only in Minneapolis, but to see, the breaking of car windows, the shoving of people down on the street, that little 5-year-old with the little blue hat with the little white things hanging off. I mean, that breaks your heart. And those are the kinds of images that I think will stick with people, and I think will have a political resonance for people on the Republican side of the aisle. Doesn't mean that you get the majority of those folks on the Republican side, although maybe you do, but you get a sufficient number of them such that you can come up with a way in which we finally come to grips with our so-called immigration problem.
I mean, Isaac, it's almost exactly the point you were making, that these images matter. And the image of Liam was seen around the world. But I wonder how far we are from that moment he describes, where Republicans have to take a step back because the political price they pay in a free and fair election, if that's what we have next November, is so seismic that they have to wake up? Or do you think what do you make of this moment for the Republicans?
Well, I think you and Tim are both right to point to J.D. Vance and his role in this, and also to the potential looming action in Springfield, Ohio, against a group of Haitians there who have temporary protected status. And we all know the backstory here about this just absurd notion that members of this community were eating cats and dogs. So we're seeing the way that misinformation and just outright slander is underpinning some of the harshest tactics. But we also know that there is a massive court fight unfolding over all of this, and that immigration attorneys have been quite successful in filing these habeas corpus petitions, which are a really important safeguard against arbitrary detention, and that judges have been, overwhelmingly favorable to these sort of petitions and have released the people who've been detained, on a bond in many of these cases. So lawyers are fighting back in the courts and actually finding a lot of success doing so.
Yeah, I mean, Ruth, to that point, legally, the Trump side has won very little. And let me play one more piece of reporting. This is from the New York Times on the students and the kids affected.
I think as a community, we should respect people's homes and the people themselves. These people are important to us and others. We should treat everyone the same, even if we don't know them. I think after losing someone I love, this kind of makes me sad, but I hope everyone can still have their loved ones next to them.
You are scaring schools, people, and the world. You should be kind, helpful, and caring like normal police, not dangerous, scary, and stealing people. I think you should make friends with the world. Love a Valley View student.
You're making people get really sad because you're just taking them away without them doing anything. I chose to draw this because it helped you realize that if you were getting taken by ICE, you would feel miserable.
I would say to Liam that I hope he is safe.
how would you feel if he came back to class?
Happy because he was taken.
Ruth, it's an extraordinary moment when the country you cover is learning its lessons on humanity and empathy from children, but that's exactly where we are.
Yeah, the basic decency, empathy, and unfortunately, we're 10 years into President Trump's attempts to change the moral and emotional fabric and feeling of the nation. You know, in his 2016 rallies, he used to say stuff like routinely, oh, the problem is nobody wants to hurt each other anymore. And he's tried to inculcate suspicion, hostility, and label empathy as weakness. And it's children who have that basic decency. But, you know, what they're trying to do here is by proclaiming everything that was legal under Biden now illegal, or just discarding it, they're really trying to discard the entire framework of human rights and law and structures of democracy. And the end game is, of course, population re-engineering. That's Miller's and Vance, too, to get rid of brown people, but white South Africans can come in. And when you're into this fanaticism, you want children to be gone. You want young people to be gone. You don't want the wrong kind of families having babies in your country. That's what we're up against.
Thank you for saying all the difficult and hideous things out loud, all of you. Ruth Ben-Ghiat, Isaac Stanley Becker, thank you so much for starting us off today. Tim sticks around a little bit longer. You can catch more of that interview, my interview with former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder, on this week's episode of The Best People. He's completely brilliant and prescient on everything he speaks about. We talk more about Minneapolis and the ordinary people engaging in extraordinary acts of courage and protest there. Scan the QR code on your screen to listen to it right now after the break. For us, the people of a long time super conservative district in Texas have weighed in on the moment. They've spoken out about how they think the last year of Trump 2.0 has gone. It is shocking. We'll bring it to you next.